Okay, well, I am on the DL here with Mandy Froehlich. How are you doing today, Mandy?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Hot? We're a little hot down here, but we're making it.
Yeah.
So, I think we wish we could share some of the. I know it's hotter up there in Wisconsin, but we'll take the what you consider hotter. Uh,
Yeah.
I'd take that temperature right now.
Yeah.
So,
Whatever Mother Nature is trying to cook, like it's done.
yeah,
Like the bell has rung.
I think you're right. I think you're right. You can literally go outside, and at least my lawn, you can hear the grass just kind of sizzling, and so uh,
Slowly dying.
slowly dying. You can only water so much. It's beyond it. But I know you've had a busy summer from being doing your consulting. I know you're a consultant. You're an author. And you do so much traveling in regards to speaking on your books and in teacher self-care. So I know your summer has been pretty much nonstop ever since it started. Uh,
Yeah.
but I appreciate you taking this time to kind of be here and visit with me today.
Yeah. I appreciate you having me on. Thank you for asking.
Well, let's start by just how did you get to where you are today? I know it's a general question, but talk to a little bit about your background and kind of where you're at and what you're doing today.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I started out as an elementary teacher. And I actually taught a year. I actually taught a year of middle school first, which I loved teaching. I absolutely loved middle schoolers. I was hired on a 1 year limited term contract to teach family and consumer ed and sex ed to middle schoolers. And so that was my very first throw me in the deep end of the pool first year teaching. Like it wasn't, they couldn't find anybody to teach it and they asked me to do it, and I said yeah. And so that I learned so much that year. Like going into, I always swore I would never teach middle school. I was going into middle school teaching a content area I was never trained in. And so learned a ton that year, but moved into elementary. So I taught fourth and fifth grade. And from there, I became the burnt out teacher that so many people talk about, and felt like I needed to leave education, but was in a spot that a lot of teachers are right now, where they're like, "How do I even do this?
Right.
Nobody's gonna take me." I wasn't like ed tech companies weren't ed tech companies back then. Like that wasn't really a thing, and so instead I switched positions and I went to another school district that hired me as a tech integrator. So I was a tech integrator for a few years, and then I moved to being a director of innovation and technology. And so in between there, I had gotten my master's degree in ed leadership, and I have a master's degree in technology. And so it's not in like ed tech, it's in kind of the networking side of technology. And so I did the director of innovation and technology thing. I have 4 kids, and so they're all older now. But when I was going through all of these transitions, they were much younger, and so they've seen me kind of move through all of that and cry when I had a paper due because there was, had 4 kids and working full time, and kind of went through all of those pains, and so they learned a lot from that as well. But right prior to the pandemic, I had to really choose between my consulting and my job because I was working too much, and decided to take a leap of faith and start consulting.
And that's where you are today.
And
So
that's
you've
where
been
I am.
doing this exactly how many years?
I've been consulting full time since 2019, since July 2019, but I had been consulting for quite a few years part time before that. And so mostly in ed tech, though. It was really predominantly in ed tech. The mental health arena, I had started prior to my books, but more dabbling in why people decided to disconnect like I did. What created the atmosphere where teachers felt like they needed to emotionally disconnect in order to really protect themselves from some of the things that are going on. And so a lot of my research began back then, but my roots were always in ed tech. That was kind of where my consulting started.
Yeah. So you didn't necessarily intend to go into the mental health aspect when you started consulting.
True that. No. So as the story goes, there were like a few things that fell into place in order for me to go down that road. And it was not by any stretch an easy road to go down, because I was flat out told, people don't want to talk about sad teachers. You've got to stop talking about educator mental health issues. That needs to not be a thing. They are going to bring it into the classroom. They're going to give depression to their students, like all of these kinds of things.
Right.
I was told all of the things that people who go down a road of advocacy in a traditionally stigmatized area get told. But why it started was because there were a few things. First of all, I had struggles of my own with my own mental health that I had developed over the course of an abusive childhood. And I felt strongly that some of the things that I did actually made me a better teacher. Like, I was more aware of what my students felt. I was more in tune to their emotions. I could pick up on how they were feeling fairly quickly. And so that made me a strong teacher. But I also felt like I could never talk about my mental health issues in school and be vulnerable and authentic, because that piece of vulnerability of admitting that was a part of me was the ultimate authenticity. And so, like, I always felt like people never really knew me because we weren't allowed to talk about that.
Right.
Also, around that same time, I had a friend who was a paraprofessional, and she had been working with students who were, showed their emotions in sometimes physical ways. And she went to the hospital at one point and had to get a tetanus shot because a child had bit her until she bled. So she got back from the hospital, and I said, well, let me see. And she lifted, kind of like pull up her shirt sleeves, and she had bruises all up and down her arms. And I said, what is that from? Now, I honestly thought she was getting into like physical altercations with her husband. That was the first thing I thought, because there were bruises everywhere. And she said, oh, that's just from working with the kids. And she laughed and she said, and you think my arms are bad, you should see my legs, because I worked in an elementary school,
Right.
so they were short.
Right.
So, and it dawned on me how, even if like, and there are areas that we just don't like to talk about in education. And this is definitely one of them. Even though those students may not be able to help the way they communicate, even though that is something that is beyond their control sometimes, that paraprofessional or that teacher, if it's happening to them, is still essentially going and being abused every day at school. And there has to be other things that we can set up as supports for those students and for that teacher in order to support them. And so that was really where my brain went at that point. It wasn't that I felt like, oh, we need to control these students better, or, well, she just needs to take it as a teacher. It was, what else can we do, knowing that these students have these physical behaviors, to help a teacher or a paraprofessional be able to cope with their job. And so that's really some of the areas where that I had an experience in a very short period of time. Along with my own burnout that had just happened right before I was working with this paraprofessional, to put me on the path of really just helping other humans be happy.
Right.
And that's really what it comes from. Like, I want to be able to help teachers. Like, I want to be able to help students because I'm helping teachers. I want education to be better. Like, I want all those things. But the crux of why I do what I do is really just because I feel like educators, including administrators, have the right as humans to be happy. And so that's where that support really comes from.
Well, I think you've found a niche, whether intentional or not. You've really found a niche, and given the time that you came into consulting and working with educators that way, it definitely seems appropriate. So, having said that, in a, I'd say, post-COVID world, or after the pandemic, and remote learning and all the issues that came with that, what are your thoughts on the current state of education? And I ask that in terms of teacher and staff mental health. And I appreciate you bringing up paraprofessionals, because we're not just talking about teachers. We're talking about all educators, all people, all constituents within a campus.
Yeah.
And because mental health does not just affect teachers. There's a lot of people that are part of a campus, as you know. So
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on where things stand with teachers and feeling overloaded and burned out right now? Because it seems worse than it has been in a while.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. And I want to just go back to what you just said. So when I use the term educators, I actually mean anybody who works in education with kids. I think sometimes people think that because I say educators, they mean that I predominantly work with teachers, and that's not actually true.
Right.
I can't even imagine having been a principal during the pandemic. Like that's insane to me as well. And so, district admin, like educators for me really encompasses anybody that works in a school, secretaries, custodians, anybody in that field that may be working with students. So as far as post-COVID, I don't think that we're in a place where we're yet done. And I think what happened was there were a few things that happened during the pandemic, besides just the actual pandemic. We weren't prepared for this, clearly. And, that's why we call it unprecedented. It's never happened before. We weren't expecting it to happen. And so there were a couple of things that happened. I have something out there called the Hierarchy of Needs for Innovation and Divergent Thinking. And ironically, I created this a while back. It was kind of like something I created, a graphic I created, and it's basically what supports do teachers need in place in order to give them the best shot at being innovative thinkers. That's essentially what the hierarchy is. And so there's things like climate and culture, leadership, mindset, personal, professional learning. And then at the very top, once all of those levels have been met, there's the well, look at you. Yep, that's it. You are so quick. There's the kind of this open door for people to be able to choose to be innovative. Now, what happened during the pandemic is that we had massive structural issues in this hierarchy in every single level, and we were still expecting innovation. Right. And so we had teachers who were emotionally overwhelmed and for a million reasons, everything from not being able to connect with their students the way that they were accustomed to doing, to, personal adversities where family members were sick or their own kids were at home and trying to learn as they taught. Like there were many different reasons why they weren't engaged. They may not have had the healthy mindset because of some of the things that were happening, the other adversities that were happening. They weren't getting as much personalized professional development because we were just shoving things out at them, looking for something that stuck. Leadership was in some of those same spaces, not knowing what to do, super overwhelmed, don't know how to necessarily support people. And of course, I'm using generalities, right? Like we have some rock star principals that jumped in and they knew exactly what to do in an emergency and carried through, or they just tried to give as much leeway as possible. So of course I'm using huge generalities, but we asked people to be innovative without the supports that they need to be innovative. And so what happened was we set them up for failure. Not by anybody's fault. It was the nature of the beast, but that's basically what happened. So in kind of an upside down scenario, we were asking them to be innovative, kind of like Stranger Things. We're like in the upside down.
Exactly. Great analogy.
It does feel like a great analogy, doesn't it? And because we were asking them to be innovative without those supports, they basically became more disengaged. And so disengaged for me, just to be clear, means an emotional disengagement. It's not generally not done on purpose. It's usually something that happens a little bit over time as people become more overwhelmed and more tired. There are generally 7 reasons why people emotionally disengage. They become burnt out. That's the most common, but not the only one. They may become demoralized, which happens when, anything from the district to politics, go make decisions that are against their moral obligation to do better in the world for their students. There's also personal and professional adversity, secondary traumatic stress, which was even higher during the pandemic, because in many cases, teachers knew what was happening at home. Now the students are home more, and sometimes they're even able to see inside their houses and see things they hadn't actually seen before. Then we have teacher trauma. Teacher trauma I've kind of coined as things that are very specific to teachers and like traumas that happen. So active shooter drills, active shooters, harassment by parents or the community or society in general. That's sort of teacher trauma. And then the one that I added recently, because I had things like microaggressions under professional adversity kind of listed as an indicator there. But I wanted to acknowledge the part that racism plays in the disengagement of teachers from what they're doing. And so I've recently added one that was, like systemic failures, basically. It'd be like racism, stereotyping, discrimination against LGBTQ, stigma responses to mental health issues in people. So like all of those would be sort of under these 7 reasons why people emotionally disengage.
Right.
And that's really what's happened after the pandemic. We've had, I've always said that I thought there were going to be 3 waves of teacher attrition. We had one last year. The second one was this summer. And then I believe there's going to be one more wave of attrition before December. And because once people start coming back, once things start to feel a little bit normal, think of an emergency response professional. They've been in that emergency for however long, and they have been doing what they needed to do to get it done. And the second they remove themselves from that, they come down like
exactly what I was thinking.
A massive crash. And that's what some of our teachers have been experiencing. They're not in an emergency that's taken 45 minutes. They're in an emergency that's taken 2 years. And they're starting to now come down from that and having to deal with the fallout from the emotional things that have happened over that time.
Well, and it's what you said. The support wasn't there for when that happened.
Right.
It kind of reminds me of a fight or flight response. Nobody was prepared. You can't prepare for something like a pandemic.
Right.
However, when it happened, you really saw, the best of people come out. They dealt with the
Mhm.
situation. There was flexibility. People that were not tech savvy, were kind of forced to do it, and they rose to the occasion.
Yep.
And then, like you said, what I saw, we came back the following school year, and it was kind of the hybrid thing going on, but people
Mhm.
were still in that mode.
Yep.
And then when I really saw the letdown, where the post-COVID letdown was last year, because I think
Mhm.
everybody came back and thought, okay, it's going to be kind of whatever normal is now,
Mhm.
it's going to be a normal year. And I think they never had time to decompress
Yep.
from what had happened. And like you said, the supports weren't there, but yet everything was supposed to be back to normal.
Yep.
Um, and so I don't know. I think that when you said the support wasn't there, it was destined to happen. It was set up for failure. I can see that.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely. And not by, and I agree with what you said, like not by any fault of anybody's. And I think like everybody wants to place blame on people. And it's really at the end of the day, it was a global pandemic. Like how many times in history has it happened where the entire global community has been highly impacted by something like anything like this?
right.
Not many times in history. Sometimes it's been one country or something like that. It's the entire global community was not ready for this.
Not
And
at all.
so, while there may have been instances where people could have made better decisions than what they did. This was really something that we could not have been completely prepared for what happened.
Yeah.
Um, and like when you said, like when they came back, I agree. Any district, as soon as they came back full time, that's when you started to see teachers like really struggling. Um, Not because they were back, but because they were back in a space that had this weird familiarity that no longer felt familiar,
Mhm.
and it reminds me a little bit of sort of our misconception of what resilience is. We think resilience is kind of this bouncing back to what we were before, and it's really not. Like resilience is more about understanding who you become after something difficult happens and then loving that person that you are. And what happened was a lot of teachers came back and they're like, oh, I'm going to be the teacher I was before the pandemic. But that really wasn't possible anymore. They really weren't that teacher anymore. And in some ways, for really great reasons. Like they learned a lot of things. They might have had, like you said, some people had to up their technical knowledge and teaching that way. But now they're in a place where they're trying to blend what they just learned with the teacher that they were before. And in some cases, it's not meshing and they can't figure out how to get that to work.
Yeah, because the things that worked before didn't work now because the whole system was different. You
Exactly.
know, it's
Yep.
like going all of a sudden, the round peg that fit in the round hole doesn't fit anymore
Yep.
because something has happened. And you know, I just think you said it that it wasn't anybody's fault. It's just the situation, and never in my lifetime had education seen something that affected education globally.
Right.
You could not hide from it,
Right.
to
Exactly.
different degrees, of course, but
Mhm.
it was there. Talk a little bit about something you really focus on, which is teacher self-care or educator self-care,
Mhm.
and the role it can play in helping alleviate and prevent stress and burnout. And I say that uh, you know, from the standpoint of, I think at some point it's good to look back at what's happened and to talk about it. But I
Mhm.
think what I'm trying to focus on too, and teachers need is a focus on where do I go from here?
Yeah.
And how can I prevent and take care of myself from this point forward? Because sometimes, you almost have to turn off social media and television because pandemic is all you hear.
Yeah.
And you want to talk about what can we do about it. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, I think it's important to acknowledge that along with educators doing things to take care of themselves, there has to be other partnerships that are created with principals who are also taking care of themselves and modeling that behavior, district administrators. Hopefully one day society is a little bit more supportive of the education system and they start taking responsibility for some of the things that happen in our systems. But there has to be a coupling of things being taken off from teachers' plates, initiatives looked at and see, like, are they really necessary? Like, we've gone through a pandemic. Do we really need some of these initiatives that we still have? Are there different things that we can take off or take away from teachers in order to support them in having more time to do the things that they need to do? Telling teachers to take care of themselves in a silo is not going to work. It has to be coupled with other things that are changing in the system in order to give them the space to be able to do that. I also think that I look at self-care under the umbrella of healing. And so if I had to say, a responsibility, using air quotes, responsibility that teachers would have right now in regards to everything that's happening, it would be to take time to heal from the things that have happened. And some people are doing this. They're doing it by leaving the profession. Like, we're seeing this in droves, right? It is they've hit a wall. Education has crossed a boundary, whatever it is. They've chosen to take the time to heal away. And I actually think that's okay. And unfortunately, it also disables the system a bit. However, when we're looking at focusing on humans, they may need that time to heal. Self-care is a part of building resilience. It is a part of healing. And there's a lot of things that fall, I kind of say there's 4 different categories of self-care. There's physical, emotional, intellectual, and spiritual. And spiritual really being about not so much about religion as it is about really understanding your purpose and living that purpose and things like that. And so that self-care of those 4 quadrants is really important to be able to support yourself in a holistic way and be able to come back, to a place where you can love yourself again, have more self-awareness, to know when you're going down the road of maybe burnout again, because it's not something that just goes away forever. Sometimes it happens again and you have to be able to watch for it. Self-care, activities in self-care are the ways that you do that. A common misconception with self-care is that it is always things like getting massage, getting your nails done,
Yes.
Doing yoga. And I often joke that if self-care was only doing yoga, I would never be able to do self-care because my body does not bend that way. Like, that's not a thing. I cannot do yoga. Self-care is really anything you enjoy or anything that takes care of your body. So if you have diabetes and you go through the process of taking care of your diabetes and making sure you're being healthy, that's self-care. If you enjoy knitting, that's self-care. Anything that you really enjoy doing, gardening. Some people really enjoy cleaning their house. I don't understand those people, but they do. And if that's what you enjoy doing, that's self-care. And so self-care is really about working through some of the pain that you had and healing that pain through taking care of yourself. And so that's where self-care is important. Yeah. That's good.
Well, I think it varies for, what works. What's self-care for one person is not self-care for another. It's
Absolutely.
like you said, it's not necessarily one thing you do. You got to
Mhm.
tap into, you know, and yeah, this is talking to as you're talking, I'm thinking about, you're talking about healing, and this is was a trauma of
Mhm.
sort,
For sure.
and so there's some post-traumatic issues that I think everybody to some extent, it's just a matter, it's all relative,
Yep.
what administrators had to deal with in terms of that is different than what a teacher versus a paraprofessional versus, a superintendent.
Yeah,
There was enough craziness and stress to go around.
for sure.
And it was just, it wasn't a matter of if somebody was dealing with it, it was what they were dealing with and how.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, and the level to which they were dealing
yeah,
with it.
it just varied in that. It wasn't a matter of whether they were dealing with it or not.
Right.
Um,
And I actually think there are some like pre-steps to self-care for some people. Like for example, some people are still in the space where they have to accept that self-care is necessary. They want to fight against the idea of self-care so badly because they say they
mhm.
don't have the time. It's not necessary. They're still in that space where they have to accept that taking care of yourself is necessary and okay. Some people are in this space where they're like, yeah, I get it about self-care, but I don't know what to do. And I was in that space and I understand that. It happens when you're working full time and you have 4 kids and you're getting your master's degree and you're trying to run your household, and all of a sudden you turn around one day and you're like, I don't even know who I am anymore. I know my kids like baseball. I know my kids like dogs. I know my kids like this, they like that, but I have no idea what I like anymore as like Mandy the human. And so some of it is about figuring that out again. I wanted forever to be a runner. I just want like people who run. I think it's amazing that they do that. And I wanted to be a runner. And so when I tried start doing self-care, I tried running and I tried so hard and I could not do it. It was not the self-care for me, but I love to walk. And so I
Right.
had to find that out through the course of trial and error and figuring out what I liked and what I didn't. And then, there's the actual self care. So I think that sometimes those two things have to be the precursor to self care. And there's a lot of self awareness that goes along with that.
We talked about current teachers, veteran teachers leaving, and I
Mhm.
saw them. I saw really for the first time, you'd see them put in 2 weeks notice and they're gone, or
Mhm.
middle of the year. They weren't waiting until the end of the year.
Yeah.
And a lot has been said about, it wasn't just um, young teachers, or it was veterans. It was all across the board. But speaking about new teachers, what do
Mhm.
you think? How can we help new teachers as they come into this crazy situation that even though they didn't quote they didn't have to deal with the pandemic per se, they're still in a post-pandemic situation. What are your thoughts on how we can better support new teachers as they enter this workplace to retain them? Yeah,
Yeah. Um, well, the one thing that I think would help is the understanding of what they need to do in order to create good boundaries. And part of that also is the teachers who are there in the district and the administration, um, helping them create those boundaries and then respecting them. Because sometimes, well, the new teacher will do it, the new teacher will do it, the new teacher will do it. And then all of a sudden, they are so overwhelmed and burnt out just from trying to figure out how teaching even works, that they don't want to be in that profession anymore. And we remember what it was like our first year of teaching. No matter what you taught and no matter what you did, there is nothing like new teacher tired. Like that is an
hmm
exhaustion that is unexplainable to people who have never taught. And then when you combine that with the pandemic, it's no wonder they're leaving. We had people in normal times leaving after 3 to 5 years. And so it's really important to be able to help them understand what burnout is, help them understand, work on their self-awareness so that they know what the symptoms are. They know what to do about that. They have strategies for coping, especially if they already have some sort of mental health issue, making sure for everybody that there is mental health services that are free. And I don't mean there's so many things when I say that I have to be very clear about, because HR departments will regularly argue with me, but that are actually free. You don't have to pay your deductible first, because some people cannot afford a deductible for mental health services. That they can get the same counselor of their own choice for as many sessions as they need through their insurance, that it's easy to find a provider. They can find one in less than 5 calls, in less than 30 minutes. And that the 1-800 numbers that are often given as their services are only for emergency services or to find a provider. And so there's a lot of different things that go along with that. And that's for all teachers, not just new teachers, but that's definitely something that would help as well, is helping them understand that, so they know where to go when they feel like they need help. And I'm actually working with an insurance company right now, talking about how to create almost like I'm not awesome with insurance, but like some sort of rider
Okay.
for school districts that they can purchase, that would sort of like an accident insurance, where it would pay for all of their mental health services, and they could offer it to their employees either as an option or as a part of their package. Because I feel like insurance services are so crucial to support mental health.
Right. Well, I think, just like you have a dental rider, you
Right.
have, so I think that's what you're working on there. And so I think it's going to take, it's going to take more stuff built into the system to help
Mhm.
teachers, that support. They didn't have the support before. It would have been impossible to predict what kind of support educators would need. But now that we know, what can we, we're talking about the things that can take place to help teachers and educators maintain their health and be aware of those signs to stay on top of it. Because, like you said, things get better, but you need to just be aware of the signs so that you can know when more self-care or support is needed.
Yeah,
Sometimes you don't even know. And I know
absolutely.
as a new teacher, I was guilty of blowing and going and as hard as you can, and
Mhm.
you don't know what boundaries to look for,
Yep.
and you don't know what you don't know, and
Yep.
that's good in some ways, but you look up and you're like, what do I do? I'm completely out of gas. And
Yeah.
we've always seen that February, March drag where everybody's tired. I
Yep.
saw it in October last year.
Yeah. Yep.
And I think we're just talking about all the ideas that we can do, all the different things we can do moving forward.
Absolutely.
How can a coach? I'm a digital learning coach. So how can a digital learning coach or an instructional coach like myself, um, what would you suggest we do to help educators with taking care of themselves as we work with them? Because we have, directives and things that we're trying to do, but what kind of support would you recommend we provide, or how can we provide more support?
Sure. I think that first of all, like modeling wellness, taking care of yourself as well. One of the things that I saw the most frequently for instructional coaches during the pandemic was demoralization. And that was because when they move into being a coach, often their moral obligation changes from I'm going to support, from being a teacher, from like, I'm going to support students to I'm going to support teachers so that they can best support students. Right. And the teachers were so burnt out and overwhelmed that they often couldn't follow through on the things that they would typically follow through with. And, that coaches would be there to help them with coaching cycles and new initiatives and all of those kinds of things. And so demoralization was probably one of the most common afflictions, I guess, that I saw with instructional coaching. So the first thing that I would recommend is actually kind of checking yourself and making sure that, you're not suffering and that you are working on healing yourself and all of those things. Also, by going through that process, you're going to become more empathetic to teachers and understand what potentially they might need in order to move on as well, right? The second thing I would say is that to start to determine when it is appropriate to hold space and when it is appropriate to move somebody forward. And so like there were times when I was an instructional coach when a teacher was having a bad day, and my entire job that day was to sit in our coaching meeting and help them through what it was that they were experiencing or just listening to them. And I tried to get into the habit of saying, like, if a teacher was kind of starting where it sounded like they were really upset about something and they needed to talk about it, I would actually say, do you need advice or do you just need me to hold space? And if they said, I just need you to hold space, then that's what I would do. But I couldn't do that every single time that we met to coach. I couldn't only hold space. However, in that question, they would have to reflect on what it is quickly, what they needed, right? Like, do I need advice or do I need to hold space? And if they continually say hold space, they're going to hear themselves say that. And they're at some point, they're going to be like, okay, well, I need to stop having this other human hold space for me because I can't, because I need to actually do something. And if that doesn't work, if that strategy doesn't work, then, starting to talk to them about what the goal is for that meeting by the end of it and trying to hit that goal, even if it's just a really small one. Like if they are super upset and they're not in the space to do what it is that they need to do, say like this one thing has to happen. Like we have to, plan a separate time for our co-planning meeting. Like if we want to talk about this hard thing right now, we have to also still talk about co-planning, or we have to get this one document filled out together, or we have to go through this first part of this coaching cycle, or we have to review the data that we had gotten on your student. So like we can start out this meeting and I can hold space for you, but by 30 minutes, we have to have this thing done. And, so like, I think that there are different strategies that you can use to move people down that path while still remaining empathetic to what it is that, that they need as well.
Yeah. It's just, it boils down to maintaining that relationship.
For sure.
And building those relationships. And I found myself doing what you just mentioned a lot, where someday the biggest thing and the best help I could be was to listen.
Yeah.
And that's what someone needed. And any help I was going to provide other than that, I had to do the listening part first.
Right.
And then, the better your relationship I've found is, and the more you put into that part of it, then the more you can do those things and say, okay, we've got to push forward into this. But if you don't have the relationship to help them hold space, as you said, and take care of what's necessary, then you can't move forward. They're not in a space to do that.
Yep, absolutely. And I think also in holding space, that's another great reason to take care of yourself is because you have to have the space to hold. Like you have to be able to have that space. And I think sometimes we talk about holding space as something that is unlimited for us to do. And I've found for me, it's not. Like I have to have the emotional capacity to be able to hold that space for them. I need to be able to detach myself from what it is that they need and how they're feeling, and in order to be able to hold that space and not get so overly empathetic that I am taking on their emotions.
Right.
So it's a great reason for an instructional coach to be aware of those types of things as well. And like you said, with the relationship, sometimes when you've taken the time to form those relationships, sometimes it's to have those difficult conversations of, we have to move on. There's no solution to this. It's like, I know it's frustrating, and it's frustrating for me as well. However, we have to move forward with this because it's expected, part of our jobs, the right things to do, whatever it is. Having those difficult conversations with people.
Well, there's I'm glad to see people like yourself talking more about what needs to be done with this. And so that we can better take care, everybody can take better care of themselves. And then be better moving forward. And what I hear you saying is, in order for me to take better care of the teachers and the educators that I deal with, I got to start with me to put myself in a position to support them, so
Right.
It all boils down to us taking care of ourselves, and so that we can be there for the people that need us.
Yep, absolutely.
So and just a little bit for somebody that is wanting to do what we're saying, to maintain self-care and to stay on top and bring themselves out of a discouraging phase, or to prevent another one from happening. You've got several books that you've written that they can rely on. They can also go to your website, which is mandyfroehlich.com.
Yep.
And just talk a little bit about, the books and the resources on your website that they may be able to use for what we're talking here in terms of self-care and just ideas. They may not know a place to start.
Absolutely.
Where could they start?
So on my website, I do have a blog, which has a lot of different things that I've written over time about educator mental health and educator mental health issues. So there's a lot of just articles on there that, are more or less what I'm thinking about the current state of where we are and potential solutions for what we could do. I also have some resources that people can access as well. So the resources are like the Divergent EDU graphic is on there. There's the different types of self-care and what is included in that. We have some mindfulness. There's a mindfulness chapter in there that supports the educator mindfulness course that I have as well. And so there's kind of all of that on there. There's the educator disengagement graphic, although that one needs to be updated with the systemic issues that I discussed before. And then there's a few recommended resources on the bottom. There's Happy Feed, that's sort of a gratitude app that is pretty cool. And then How to Get Away with Teaching is a self-care box subscription that teachers can subscribe to, and it's a women-owned small business, and so I try to support them as much as I can.
Okay.
From there, on the top, there's a media page. That media page has a bunch of stuff. It has any articles that I've written for other places, such as Edutopia and Alice Keeler. And then there's also articles that have been written about my work. So they reference my work in some way. There's some videos on there that are basically like video podcasts. And then at the very bottom are all of the podcasts, or most of the podcasts that I've been on. And there's a little blurb on there about what they reference. Some of my stuff is ed tech, of course, because that's what my where I came from. And so in some cases it's ed tech, but for the most part it's SEL and educator mental health.
Well, you've got a lot of great stuff on here, so I'd highly recommend people checking this out. And then you've got books that can be purchased on your, can you purchase them on your site or through Amazon?
You can purchase them on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Matchbooks.com. I have 4 books. So one is Divergent EDU, which is based on the hierarchy of needs for innovation and divergent thinking that we talked about before. Mm-hmm. Reignite the Flames and The Fire Within are similar in the way that they discuss educator mental health, but The Fire Within is more narrative for a good part of it. And so if you're looking kind of for a teacher-focused chicken noodle soup for the soul type narrative storytelling, that would be The Fire Within. Reignite the Flames is more about the educator disengagement that I was talking about earlier. And then the latest book that I had put out last year was the Educator's Matchbook. And the Educator's Matchbook is actually a workbook that is a support to Reignite the Flames. Although you can use it totally on your own, I put it on its own. I put enough information in there that you wouldn't need to have read Reignite the Flames to see it or to use it. I have 2 more books coming out. One of them is still kind of in the processing stages, but the other book is called The Wounded Healer. And I'm writing that with a friend of mine that is a counselor. And we're talking about the importance of healing wounds and what it means to have wounds when you're somebody who works with other humans, and the impact that can have. So that's really what The Wounded Healer is about. And that should be out next year.
All right. Well, I highly recommend anybody listening to check out your website, definitely to read your books. I think there's not only good anecdote, references that people can identify at all different levels. There's something in these books that they can identify with, but then there's also a message of hope in there, that it's that the, how to look forward. And there's I felt each one of the stories in The Fire Within, had a message of how teachers dealt with certain mental health issues, but yet came out on top. Mm-hmm. And actually, found something within, hence the name, but they found something through that adversity that they were able to power through and come out on the other side. So, but I highly recommend everybody checking that out. But, well, we always end with a lightning round question. I don't know if are you ready for this?
I'm ready.
Okay. And 10 questions. At least today, 10 questions. No judgment. I may ask for explanation,
Okay.
You can pass on a question, but there's no need, there's no need. If you think you're ready, we'll get started on that.
I'm ready.
Okay. Cake or pie?
Pie.
All right. Any particular kind?
I really love cherry pie. That's probably my favorite.
Okay. What is your hidden talent?
Roller skating, I would say.
Rollerblading or roller skating?
Oh no, old school roller skating. Like when I used to roller skate, I used to work at a roller skating rink, and that was before rollerblades were even invented. Like they weren't even a thing, at least not mainstream. And so, nope, I had the white skates with the purple wheels, and that was That was
Nice.
my talent. Yep.
Do you still have this talent, and do you still practice it?
Not on a regular basis, but I did go roller skating like
We're talking about self-care here, so
yeah, maybe I should start that again, like roller skate up and down my driveway like I
yeah.
used to. Yeah. No, I haven't done it in a while, but I did do it as an adult, maybe about a year prior to the pandemic, and I didn't fall even one time. So I felt like at my age that was a win.
Yeah, sometimes you quit while you're ahead. So.
Yeah, right, exactly.
What never fails to make you laugh?
The show Friends.
Okay.
I love that show. I don't know why. I've watched it a million times, and it makes me laugh every single time.
All right. What is one thing you wished you enjoyed more?
Exercise. I would love to enjoy exercise more because I can't enjoy it. So
And the people that, like you said, that enjoy running miles and miles, I wish I was there, but I'm not,
I know. I wish.
Right. Beg forgiveness or ask permission?
I think ask permission, because to me, begging forgiveness just means that you don't trust your leadership. And so, like, nobody wants that. So
Right.
asking permission, like, I feel like there's a little bit of, like begging forgiveness feels a little bit like badass, and that you want to, go down that road. But at the end of the day, I feel like asking permission is better.
Right. That's fair. What are the 3 least likely words someone would use to describe you?
Probably serene would be one. And then probably, well, this is going to be 2 and 3, low maintenance. I don't think anybody would ever say I'm low maintenance. So.
That's all right. Who inspires you? Who inspires Mandy Froehlich?
So I don't know how this is going to come across. So I'm going to have to explain it a little bit, but I'd actually have to say my future self. And the reason that I say that isn't because I think I am like this incredibly awesome godlike person, but more because I have to work, because of my own mental health issues, really, really hard on self-love and self-esteem and all of those kinds of things. And I also work really hard. And when I look back on where I was and how far I've come, I always think to myself, what's it going to look like in another 5, 10, 15 years? What am I going to be like then when I've worked so hard and how far I've come? So I think that as far as what inspires me is to be that person that I really want to be in the future.
That's a great answer. So
Thanks.
Yeah, that's a good answer. All right. So we'll go from one that's close, a little more serious to the next one. What is the lamest dessert? And I'm air quoting dessert that people try and pass off as a dessert. And I'm thinking more of like at a party, they're in charge of bringing that.
I think I'd have to say Jell-O.
Yeah.
I can see where somebody might say something like fruitcake or something, but that seems really obvious. I actually think that Jell-O is a kind of a lame dessert. Like if you're
in charge of bringing dessert and you show up with Jell-O, there should be some explanation on that.
Yes, and I don't care if it's cubed. I don't care if it's layered. Like you can do all the fancy things to Jell-O if you want. It really doesn't matter.
It's still Jell-O.
Still not. It's still just Jell-O. So
good one. Is double dipping at a party ever acceptable?
Well, pre-COVID, I would have said yes. I would have been like, yep, just don't lick the bowl in front of anybody, post-COVID, I think people are a little bit more,
It's changed the
picky.
game, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. Now we can't only not double dip. We can't be like 6 feet away from each other as we're at the table. So I think that it has changed the game a little bit. But I would say that if given the choice, I am a double dipper. I did have a niece though that she used to take like a pretzel and dip it in cheese and suck the cheese off and then re-dip the pretzel. And I always thought that was extraordinarily wrong. That was not okay.
That's going up a whole other level.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So we have like not double dipping, and then we have double dipping, and then we have sucking off the cheese. Like that's like a whole another level of
yeah.
that.
Yeah. Whew. Okay. Yeah, I hope she doesn't do that in front of people.
All the time.
Okay. Well, if she's comfortable in her own skin, All right. So last one, if you had your own show and we're doing an interview with me, what is one question you would like to ask?
So probably the most important question that I think determines somebody's personality, and that would be dog or cat.
Dog.
Dog. Because there's dog people and then there's cat people. And those are two totally different personality people. Not one better than the other.
No, they're different. They're different. And I think I would be more of a cat person if I wasn't allergic.
Oh, maybe. Yeah.
But I've always, it's always been dog for me. So, like you said, it's not either bad or good. I don't know what that says, but in your mind, you've got me somewhere on the spectrum.
Yeah, I've got you pegged now. So
yeah. And that's okay. That's okay. But Mandy, I just really appreciate you taking the time to be here and to talk about this important issue and share some reflections on what's going on, but also how educators can do and be proactive to take care of themselves and to stay on top of their own mental health as moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
The issues, although they may change and will change, are not going to go away, and the issue of taking care of ourselves is going to be there no matter what happens.
Yeah.
So Mandy Froehlich, you have been on the DL. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You bet. You're welcome back anytime.
Thank you.